My name is Camilla Hughes. I'm 28, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family's invisible scaffolding, the one they call when the Wi-Fi dies, when passports vanish, or when life's chaos needs a calm hand. My father calls me responsible, my mother calls me reliable, and my younger sister, Lila, calls me whenever something small or catastrophic happens. I'm the quiet one, the one behind the scenes. Lila is the bright one. The spotlight follows her naturally. My job is to make sure the stage doesn't collapse. I own a modest two-bedroom on the edge of town. I fix my own leaky faucets, label my breaker box, and keep extra batteries in a clear bin because chaos always begins with dead remotes. I teach at a community college. Not glamorous, but I like it. Students call me ma'am, and I pretend I'm not startled by the word. On the Tuesday this began, I was in a hospital room with my grandfather, listening to the slow, steady whoosh of machines that kept him alive. The vinyl chair I slept on for 2 nights was stiff, my arms crossed over a jean jacket that still smelled faintly of laundry soap. I held his hand and talked about mundane things, the Cardinals game, the weather, anything to keep routine alive, because routine feels merciful when someone you love is fading. My phone sat face down on the rolling tray beside a warm ginger ale and plastic cups. It buzzed with unknown numbers. I ignored it. I poured water for my grandmother and walked her to the window, back again, talking about nothing on purpose. When she finally dozed off, I noticed 3 voicemails from a number labeled County Title Services. Nobody ever calls from a title office with good news. I set the phone aside without listening. My mind had room for only one crisis: my grandfather. At noon, my father, Evan, appeared with 2 coffees. His energy was familiar, that forced cheer he's always worn for family games or dinners. He kissed Grandma's forehead, squeezed my shoulder, and pulled me into the hallway. "You look tired," he said. "I am," I replied. He glanced at my phone. "Put that away. Today isn't for paperwork." "I wasn't," I said. "Good," he said, "because Lila has a lot on her plate." He paused, corrected himself. "We all have a lot on our plates." I didn't answer. His words lingered in the sterile air like dust motes in sunlight. Later, he would drop a sentence that would land like a folded note across my chest. "She needed it more than you." Grandpa died quietly Wednesday morning, the way he had wanted. Machines beeped their last, nurses shuffled past, and we hugged each other without knowing exactly what that meant anymore. I drove home in a daze. Every traffic light too bright, every shadow too heavy. When I opened my front door, I found 2 envelopes on the mat, one from a bank I knew, one from a bank I didn't. I fed the cat, showered, and finally sat at the kitchen table, towel on my head, opening them as if they were birthday cards. The first envelope was cheerful, listing a credit limit, a variable APR, and an initial advance for $68,000. Funded to my sister. The second envelope was a deed of trust, recorded against my house. I stared at my name, at the numbers, and felt a coldness creep into my bones. I called Dad. He answered on the second ring. "Breathe," he said, as if I'd already begun yelling. "What is it?" I asked. "The house," he said cheerfully. "We used a line. It's smart money. Interest is low. Lila needed it to close the lease." "You mortgaged my house," I said. My voice sounded unreal, even to me. "Come on," he corrected. "I'm on the title too. It's for the family. We're balancing. She needed it more than you." That sentence landed flat, like a drawer stuck until you pull harder. She needed it more than you. I felt every small indignity of my life, years of quietly supporting, of bending and yielding, pressing into me at once. I counted the tiny debts, towing her car at 19, paying for lost IDs at 21, helping with her failed Etsy shop at 25. Always me, always quiet, always invisible. I could feel the weight of this new betrayal pressing down on my chest, but beneath it was a quieter, fiercer thought. I wouldn't let this happen again. I sat there, staring at the papers, feeling the house that was mine, truly mine, slipping from my hands without my consent. My grandfather's room was still warm in my memory, and in that warmth, a decision crystallized. I would fight for control, for clarity, for boundaries I had never demanded before. And that was where my story began. the slow, deliberate reclamation of what was mine, the first chapter in a life where generous would no longer mean silent victim. I didn't sleep well that night. My mind replayed Dad's words, Lila's ambitious smile, the neat stack of envelopes that had turned my life upside down. By morning, I had decided this wouldn't be swept under the rug. My house, my name, my money. Boundaries needed to be clear. I made a list, printed copies of the deed and mortgage statements, drafted a note summarizing the situation in plain language. Calendar first, chaos later, that was my mantra. By 5 p.m., a group text went out. My place, 7:30 p.m., non-negotiable. Mom sent a heart emoji. Dad wrote, "We're not fighting about this." Lila replied, "I have a walkthrough at 7 o'clock. I typed back, "Then come at 8. The hours until then were long and quiet. I paced the living room, labeling folders, rechecking statements, imagining the conversation. My apartment, usually calm, felt like a courtroom waiting to convene. I arranged the papers in front of me, the deed copy, the mortgage statement, the fine print about the right to cancel. Every detail a weapon in the quiet war I had decided to wage. When the doorbell finally rang, Mom arrived first, carrying foil pans like a shield, her cheerful veneer masking the tension underneath. Dad followed, eyes scanning my apartment like he always did, evaluating every surface. Lila stepped in last, making that wide, confident circle with her arms, a gesture I remembered from childhood, signaling, somehow, that I wasn't allowed inside her emotional bubble. I gestured for everyone to sit at the table. My voice was steady, deliberate. We need to talk about boundaries. Lila's eyes flashed red. Mascara had smudged into a smoky line, a silent accusation. "You're cruel," she said. "I'm consistent," I said. Calm, firm. The words felt heavy in the air. "I'm not cruel. I'm clear." Dad shifted uneasily. "Camila, you'd embarrass us." "No," I interrupted, pointing to the papers. "I will not let anyone use my house as collateral again. No automatic assumptions, no more shared cards, no more surprises." Silence filled the room. It was the kind of silence that counts every heartbeat, measures the distance between people. Lila's shoulders trembled. I could see the guilt and frustration warring on her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it, trying to find the words that wouldn't land like blows. "You'll regret this," she finally said, her voice a fragile mimic of Dad's earlier prophecy. "Maybe," I said, "but I'll regret it in my house, not like this." Mom put a gentle hand on Lila's arm. "Honey, your sister is finally doing something for herself. Don't—" "I'm not being cruel," I said again. "I'm taking my house back. That's the difference." Dad exhaled, jaw tight. "You always were small about money," he muttered. "I'm precise," I said. "There's a difference." Lila's eyes narrowed. "You love rules. Here's a rule. Family helps each other." "Yes," I said. "Family helps. But it doesn't mean you can use me without asking." The room was tense, the kind of tension that bends time. Every glance, every twitch of the hand, every quiet intake of breath felt magnified. I could see Lila's dreams, her ambition, pressed against the wall of my boundaries. She wanted me to bend, but this time I wouldn't. I picked up my phone, confirmed the right to cancel the equity line, and placed it down. My father watched me like I'd grown a spine overnight. Lila blinked, unsure how to respond. For the first time in years, I was not the quiet supporter. I was Camilla Hughes, not invisible, not a utility, not a bridge for everyone else to cross. After a long pause, Lila finally spoke. "Fine, you win. I'll find funding elsewhere." Her voice was tight, almost brittle. "You don't need me to tell you how," I said, "and I won't. Eyes, not money. Read contracts, not sign them. That's it." She stepped back, circling wide, the gesture of childhood drawing invisible lines around herself. "You'll regret this," she said again. "Maybe," I replied, "but I'll regret it on my terms, in my house." Mom sighed. Dad exhaled through his nose. Lila's words hung in the air, heavy with both anger and reluctant respect. I had drawn a line and everyone could see it. That night, I prepared for what would come next. Documentation, legal confirmations, and the quiet, relentless rebuilding of my life. I made copies, secured originals in fireproof envelopes, backed up digital files, changed passwords. Every small act was a reclaiming of space, a reclaiming of autonomy. I went to bed feeling exhausted but strangely empowered. For the first time in years, the boundaries I had only imagined were beginning to exist. My house was mine again, and in it, I could finally breathe. The next morning, the world felt quieter, though my phone buzzed incessantly with missed calls. Mom, Dad, Lila, unknown numbers. I didn't answer. I needed the space to process, to hold on to the clarity I had fought so hard to create. By 10:31 a.m., I called the bank. I repeated the case number, confirmed the rescission letter had been uploaded, and listened to the representative reassure me, "You are within your rights." My hands, which had trembled the night before, finally steadied. I said thank you more times than necessary, but there was no triumph in it, only a grounded, sober relief. The silence that followed was sharp. Lila didn't call immediately. My parents didn't. I could feel their frustration, their sense of disbelief, like waves pressing against a glass wall. Every unanswered call, every paused text reinforced the boundary I had set. By evening, Lila arrived. Her knock was familiar, demanding, confident, but she had no right to step over the line I'd drawn. When I opened the door, her eyes were red, mascara smudged, a storm behind them. "Let me in," she demanded. "We can talk here." "No," I said. My voice was steady, controlled. "This is my house. You are welcome to stand outside." "You're cruel," she said again. Her voice quivered with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and grief. "I'm consistent," I said. "I'm clear. That's not cruelty." She flinched, then straightened, exhaling like she was trying to convince herself she was still in control. "Fine. You win. We'll figure it out elsewhere." "Good," I said. "I won't help fund your lease. Eyes, not money. I can advise, but I won't sign or guarantee anything. That's my boundary." She made the wide circle again, stepping back, drawing herself inside a protective bubble she hoped I wouldn't penetrate. I didn't step closer. "You'll regret this," she said for the third time, trying to turn my certainty into doubt. "Maybe," I said, "but at least it's mine to regret, in my house, on my terms." After she left, I didn't collapse. I moved quietly, methodically. I pulled out my fireproof envelope, ensured every document was copied and secured. Deeds, mortgage papers, insurance statements, they all had a new order now, a structure I controlled. I backed up everything digitally, changed passwords, closed access points. This was my ritual, a reclaiming of authority, a reclaiming of my life. By the time I went to bed, my body ached, but my mind was calm. I could finally feel the subtle difference between being generous because it was expected and being generous on my own terms. For the first time, generosity wasn't an obligation, it was a choice. Grandpa's funeral came on Saturday. The black suits, the tissue boxes, the solemn eulogies, all of it felt muted through the lens of my new awareness. Lila avoided me, not with malice, but as if proximity could undo the boundary I had drawn. Dad cornered me afterward near the coat rack. "You canceled," he said. Not a question, just a statement of disbelief. "I did," I replied. "They'll release the lien this week. That's what they said." He exhaled, a mixture of relief and exasperation. "You made it hard." "I made it legal," I said. "Let's not get stuck on adjectives." That night, alone in my apartment, I went through each folder again. I replaced batteries and smoke detectors, labeled 2 calendar blocks a week, and put Grandpa's hat by the door, a reminder that responsibility can be shared, but boundaries must be personal. I cooked spaghetti and ate it on the couch with a towel tucked into my collar, a small, grounding ritual. Quiet, not empty. Monday morning brought a call from my attorney. 20 minutes of precise, calm conversation, walking me through, confirming my authority, removing Dad from the title if necessary, and documenting everything correctly. I wrote emails to my family, outlining options clearly: trust with rules, quick claim, or refinance. One simple line in bold: "You will not use my home as collateral again." The silence that followed was palpable. For 3 days, I heard nothing. Then Dad sent a short message. "We'll do it right. I'll sign off the title. I shouldn't be in charge of your roof." It was the nicest sentence I'd ever received from him, quietly acknowledging both respect and regret. Lila sent her own message, a photo of a smaller storefront, Plan B, and then texts about deposit and lease details. She asked for my eyes, not my signature, and I agreed. We spent an hour on FaceTime going clause by clause, reading carefully, discussing, and protecting each other's interests without compromising my boundaries. I finally understood something crucial. Boundaries aren't just about protecting assets, they are about reclaiming agency, about defining the space where love can exist without cost. That night, I felt a quiet pride in my autonomy, in the clarity I had fought to create. My house was mine, my voice was heard, my generosity was voluntary, not coerced. And for the first time, I believed it could stay that way. The days that followed were quieter, but not empty. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air around my apartment. I walked through each room, noticing the small details I had once taken for granted: the hum of the fridge, the warm morning light on the kitchen counter, the cat pawing gently at my slippers. Every ordinary moment felt like a victory, a reminder that my life was mine again. I started reclaiming time that had always been borrowed. No longer did I feel obligated to answer every family request immediately, to drop everything for someone else's emergency. My work at the community college became my anchor. I took the time to prepare lectures with care, to notice the little victories in my students' progress, and to appreciate the rhythm of a day that belonged to me. Lila reached out occasionally, mostly through messages, asking for advice on her lease or a gentle review of a contract. I helped where I could, eyes only, no signature. Each interaction was measured, a delicate dance between familial loyalty and self-preservation. It felt strange at first, this balance of love and boundaries, but gradually it became second nature. Mom called more often, but our conversations shifted. She no longer attempted to guilt me into overextending myself. Instead, we spoke of her garden, of recipes, of life beyond the family's constant crises. Even Dad seemed to respect the new lines I had drawn. His calls were less urgent, more thoughtful, and our conversations more honest. There was no need to fight to be heard. My voice had finally earned its place. One evening, I stood in my tiny backyard, watering the single tomato plant that had survived every year. I remembered Grandpa's hands, rough but steady, showing me how to nurture something fragile and expect the results to unfold in their own time. I realized that the same principle applied to trust and relationships. They could be tended, guided, but never forced. I reflected on the past weeks: the hospital, the sudden mortgage, the confrontation, the legal confirmations. Every moment had been a test, a push against the boundaries of patience, loyalty, and self-respect. I had learned to navigate it all without losing myself. I had learned that generosity is powerful, but only when it is chosen, not demanded. Lila's wellness studio opened in a modest strip mall with fluorescent lights and imperfect tile. She sent a photo with the caption, "We start small. I tapped the heart, said nothing more." This was not my fight, not my risk. She had found her footing, and I had found mine. Even my relationship with my boyfriend Evan grew stronger. He noticed the shift in me, not the dramatic confrontations, but the quiet confidence, the calm authority I carried into all aspects of life. He admired the way I could love fiercely, yet maintain firm boundaries, and our connection deepened, built on respect rather than codependence. We spent evenings cooking together, sharing the mundane and the extraordinary, and I finally allowed myself to feel the kind of contentment that had been absent for too long. I also noticed how I had changed internally. The constant anxiety, the subtle self-doubt that had shadowed my every decision, began to fade. I was no longer the invisible scaffolding for everyone else's life. I was a person with desires, responsibilities, and the right to say no. The walls I had built weren't barriers. They were protection, clarity, and space to grow. In moments of stillness, I thought of Grandpa, of his lessons, of the quiet strength that had been passed down through generations. I realized that boundaries are not just rules. They are expressions of self-respect, of love for oneself and others. They allow relationships to breathe, to exist without suffocation, and to thrive in honesty. As I closed the day, I labeled my calendar, checked my emergency fund, and tidied the apartment. Every small act was a reinforcement of the new order I had created. I had learned that control over my space, my finances, and my time was not selfishness. It was survival and growth. And in that quiet triumph, I finally felt free. Free to be generous when I chose to, free to protect what mattered, and free to love without losing myself. My house, my life, my choices, it was all mine, and I would never give that up again. The weeks rolled on, but the tension that had once gripped every corner of my life began to dissolve. I could finally breathe without the weight of obligations I had never agreed to, without the constant calculations of who needed what from me and when. I had created a life with clear boundaries, a life where my choices mattered, not just to me, but to everyone around me. Lila's wellness studio thrived in its small, imperfect space. She learned to navigate the challenges without my financial safety net, and I saw her grow more confident with each update she sent. The dynamic between us changed. I was no longer her default problem solver, but a sister who offered guidance when asked, not when assumed. Our relationship found its balance, a delicate equilibrium of love and independence. My parents adjusted too. Mom's calls were softer, less insistent, more genuine. She seemed to understand that my generosity was no longer a given, and her respect for my space became a quiet, steady presence in our interactions. Dad, always the pragmatist, accepted the legal and emotional boundaries I had set. His calls were no longer rushed or urgent. They were thoughtful, occasionally apologetic, often reflective. There was no bitterness, only a new rhythm in the way we connected. Evan noticed these changes most clearly. He watched as I navigated conflict, legal matters, and family dynamics with a quiet confidence that he hadn't seen before. Our bond deepened, not through drama or crisis, but through shared understanding and mutual respect. We laughed more, cooked together, and created our own rituals, small daily acts that reminded us we were building a life together, grounded in trust and equality. Even the house felt different. I walked through each room, noting the details I had once overlooked. The sunlight streaming through the windows, the hum of the refrigerator, the cat curled up in her favorite spot. Everything was mine in a way it hadn't been before, and that ownership brought with it a profound sense of peace. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the order I had created. Documents filed, calendars labeled, phone notifications silenced. I poured a glass of water, took a deep breath, and let myself reflect. I thought of Grandpa, of the lessons he had imparted without words, of the quiet strength that ran through our family line. I realized that boundaries are not walls, they are gates, carefully placed to protect what is precious while allowing love to flow freely. I thought back to the day my father had mortgaged my house without asking. The anger, the betrayal, the legal battle, it had all been a crucible, and through it I had learned something invaluable. Clarity is power, boundaries are freedom, and self-respect is the foundation for every meaningful relationship. I looked at my phone. One unread message from Lila. Thanks for the guidance. I'm figuring it out. I didn't need to respond immediately. I knew she understood the new rules, and that was enough. I set the phone down, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. Evan came in from the balcony, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed me one, smiled, and didn't ask about the past weeks, the conflicts, the legal maneuvering. He simply shared the moment. I accepted the warmth, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely present. I had built something rare, a life where generosity was chosen, not coerced, where love existed without manipulation, where my home, my time, and my heart were respected. The lessons of the past, the trials of family and finance, had culminated in this quiet triumph. And as I stood at the window that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I whispered to myself, steady and unshaken, "This is mine, my choices, my house, my boundaries, my life. I will not give it away again." My name is Camilla Hughes. I am 28. I still label the bins. I still fix what I can reach, but I am no longer invisible. I am a person with agency, with voice, with authority over my own life. And when someone I love asks for all of it, I can open the door a little, talk through the crack, and say, in a voice that doesn't shake, "No, I am generous by choice, not by default. I am free."